In the last episode of Awkward Conversations.
Today we are here talking about how to build relationships and bonds with your kids.
They know right from wrong, and you have to trust yourself as a parent that you've done a good job.
Is to say, hey, let's talk about you and your friendships. And just so you know, I'm here to keep your trust.
I think that trust is absolutely essential, is a foundational building block, no doubt. And I love the idea of kind of creating a space where there's safety.
I want to welcome Heidi Peterson Dutson. Thank you so much for coming. Heidi is a certified prevention specialist, currently employed as a prevention administrator and regional director for the Utah Office of Substance Use and Mental Health. Thank you so much for joining us today, Heidi.
Yeah, thanks, Jodie. It's such a privilege to be here.
I'm so excited to have Amy and Heidi on here, talking about different ways, new tools, new things that we can add to our toolbox, not only for ourselves, but for our kids too, to really strengthen those relationships and bonds and figure out how we do this together. Because, parenting it's a relationship, you got to work with your kid. Hey, Heidi, I know one of the things that you talk about often is social development strategy. And I would love for our audience to hear a little bit about what that is and how it affects our relationships with our kids and what we can do for them.
Yeah, definitely. One of the best things I ever have found out as a parent, because, and we've talked a little bit about this today, that there's so much we don't know, right? When we take those babies home from the hospital, there's no user manual. We can get some general instruction about how to keep them alive, but they're all such unique individuals. But it was life-changing for me as a parent when I found out that there's actually a whole field of science regarding prevention and strategies that we can use with our children at home and in our community that can actually increase the likelihood that they're going to make good decisions. And so this social development strategy is a big part of that science, and I'm really excited to share that with you today. And it, one of the things I've noticed in my many years of working with parents and this whole idea around parenting, and Greg alluded to it earlier, I think sometimes as parents, we struggle to know, when do I step in and be that parent? And when do I be the friend, right? And then as I've observed parenting partnerships among friends and other parents that I've worked with, this is often a common debate, right? The kid messes up, right? And one parent says, we've got to set stronger rules, they're walking all over us, they're taking advantage, this kid needs rules, and he needs consequences. Where the other parent is like, oh, don't do that, we've got to stay close to this kid, we got to be their friend, or they're just going to rebel more, right? And I've just found this is a very common debate. One of the things I love about the social development strategy is it really solves that for us. Because what the social development strategy says is that, we all have this idea of healthy behaviors that we want our kids to attain. We want them to be self-sustaining and independent. And when Dr. Hawkins and Catalano out of the University of Washington did this science, they're kind of the pioneers in this field. They discovered the very first thing kids need is really clear standards on a healthy belief, AKA rules. They need to know very clearly what those standards are, and that in fact, they're protective for kids. It's kind of what builds that fence for them. How far can I go before that big bad wolf's going to get me, and it gives them that sense of security. But then that begs the question, okay, if kids know the rules, and they clearly understand them, do they always follow them? And of course, we know that's not true.
I was a kid. No.
We were all kids once, and
right.
We maybe tried and tested this, right? What the research shows, and I just kind of call this the secret sauce to parenting, is that when you have a clear and firm bond with that child, they are more likely to adhere to those rules and standards that you're setting for them. And so if we go back to that debate of parent that has rules and consequences, or warm, fuzzy parent that's all about being the friend, it really does take both skills and kids need to know that their parents love them enough to say, hey, there's danger out there. And because I love you and because I want to protect that growing brain inside of your head that's so essential, like, for example, here's some clear rules about underage drinking. Like, if you drink underage, it's going to affect your developing brain. And it's going to be really hard for you to attain those goals that you have in the future.
I remember turning 30, right around 30 after I had my girls, and they were younger. And I just remember I turned to my mom and I said, Mom, thank you so much for all the times you told me no.
I love that.
And I was like, 15-year-old me would have rather thrown myself down the stairs than admit that. But my gosh, she was so right. So many times when my mom said, nope, you can't do that. Nope, I'm not going to let you do it. Like, she put those boundaries there, and I resented them at the time. But as I got older and grew through that and grew through our relationship, I was like, wow, thank you so much. Because I know it's not easy. As a parent, it's not easy to say no to your kids. You just want them to, yes, have the best time ever and it's all great. But I went back and I thanked my mom for all the times that she put those boundaries in. And I love it. They're fences. Kids are always looking for boundaries. They're looking to test how far can they go. And without those boundaries, they'll keep going.
I love it. So true. And I love, like, the fact, like, they might not let you know that they like it, but there is a sense of safety and protection there that they're going to realize somewhere down the road.
They probably don't even know that they like it or that that's what they're searching for. And they really don't. And it really, until you get older, that's the thing I always say about parenting is, like, it really doesn't pay off until they're much older and they really go, oh, I get what you were trying to do. Because in the middle of it, it can be often a very thankless, frustrating, overwhelming job. Trying to balance that. Am I their friend? Am I their parent? Am I, all of those things in the middle of it feel like a lot. So sometimes it is hard to keep that bond in that relationship.
Yeah.
We say all the time in our program, and it's, exactly what you're saying, Heidi, but limits are love. And I think that just puts a really, fine point on it, that, to set those limits is to love.
Yeah, and consequences are hard, trying to figure out what appropriate consequences are, what rules should be. And, rules change as they get older. Things, you sort of have to rework things. What is the rule for the 6th grader in the house is not going to be the rule for the 9th grader in the house. And how do we manage that and manage expectations and move those goalposts in response to behavior and possibly pull them back, and it's always kind of a moving target of where are we at, So I know when we hear the word consequences very often, particularly for kids, we typically think bad things, punishments, losing privileges, things like that. But consequences can be, there's good and bad ones. And they can lead to, sort of teaching opportunities. When you screw up, here's what we learned, here's how we do better next time, and I think teaching opportunities are just kind of the golden moment, right, Heidi?
Yeah, definitely. I love how you're hitting on that, because we've kind of put this big, like, thump behind consequences, like, this is not good, run from that. But, as we set those clear guidelines for our kids, it can be really valuable to recognize and give positive consequences too. And we can do this with substances. I know parents that have said, hey, I love you, I care about your dreams. And I know there's a lot of social pressures out there, but hey, let's make a goal together. If you can graduate from high school or make it to 21, before you make decisions around some of these substances, I will offer you this gift, or provide this incentive. And then there can be check-ins along the way. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a big monetary thing, but it can just be, I am so proud of you. Like, I recognize that you are really adhering to the standard that we have in our family, and I see you growing up healthy, and I just want you to know I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, praise is just as important.
Yeah, reinforce that positive, right? And then the other thing that the social development strategy really shows, because we talked about how you have to have that balance of rules and bonding. So the researchers said then, well, like, how do we create bonding? Like, we all know that that's a warm, fuzzy thing. We know what it feels like when we're bonded to somebody. but how do we create it? And what they found is anytime that we find an opportunity to teach a child a skill and then reinforce that with appropriate recognition, that we're creating a sense of bonding. It's like back to what Greg was saying about having time at the barbecue or time in the kitchen. That's such an awesome place to teach skills. And it can start from such a young age. You know, I know my kids, when they were 2 and 3, they could not wait to load the dishwasher and do the dishes, right? By the time they were 13, that kind of changes. They're not quite
I was going to
as
say,
excited.
can you send them to my house? Do they do dishes? Mine don't do dishes.
A 3-year-old, sure. But yeah, it kind of can be counterproductive, but that's really part of the point too. I know so many times as a mom, you know, like we have these to-do lists, right? And all of those lists are probably opportunities where we could engage our kid in like, oh, maybe I could teach my kid how to plant these flowers or how to clean the bathroom. But often we have these like pet responsibilities that like, I want to do it the way I want to do it. And if I teach my child
I
to do
don't
that,
know
I
what you're
know-
talking about.
Yeah, you know, it just won't be done up to my standards. But if we can take a step back and really take that time to model that, to teach that skill, to reinforce it, like, you know, if they did something right but could improve on something, to give them that feedback. And then when they get that right, to be like, oh my gosh, you so nailed that. Let's go out for ice cream.
Yeah.
That can pay off huge dividends. I remember an experience I had with my son. He was probably like 12, and I had some bulbs I wanted to plant in the fall. And I just wanted to get it done, you know. But I remember just thinking like, gosh, I should really go involve him. This is something he hadn't spent much time in the yard. And this might be valuable for him. And so I took that little bit of extra time to go get him, show him the tool, show how deep you need to dig, how you put the water on it. And it probably took me an extra 15, 20 minutes. But the following spring, when those tulips started to come back, and I remember we pulled into our driveway and he's like, Mom, you know, look at those tulips. That was so rewarding, and it became a bonding thing. And year after year, you know, when those came up, we could remember together when we took the time to plant those. So that would be a great suggestion for parents. Just think of your child's development. Where are they? And what new skill would excite them or make them feel more competent and confident? And the end goal of that, we can get more help around the house and in the yard, and at the same time, help our kids feel better about themselves. And really, we're preventing some of those things we don't want them to partake in, like substances and other things.
What I think is so interesting about this conversation too is that the root word of discipline in Latin, I learned along the way, is to teach. So discipline is teaching. They're, you know, one and the same, like synonymous. Yeah. And what we think about, you know, my work is mostly with young people who are already using substances, but two things that we do with the families in our program that I think can start before even young people are using substances are establishing family meeting times. And so in that same vein of like coming together, you know, planning, not a long family meeting though. Like when I think of family meeting, I was like, oh gosh, like hours, like that's just a recipe for disaster. 5-10 minutes. And it's your time to come together each week and you kind of check on. I think what's kind of fun for parents in some ways, or maybe less stressful, is, you know, all the questions. Can I go to my friend's house? I want these new pair of sneakers. You're kind of encouraging them to save their questions for that meeting time so that you're not put on the spot every single day all the time.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So you're not like doing the dishes yourself, or maybe they're doing them now. You're standing next to them because you just had that moment. But, you know, you're asking them to come to you with those questions. So you're not, you know, a barrage with questions. And likewise, then you're going to give them some space. You know, they didn't pick up their room. They didn't do the laundry like they promised. You're going to maybe bring up those conversations then around like, what happened? How can we move this forward? And then when there's substances involved, there's more, you know, other conversations associated with that. The second thing is to make behavior contracts, and maybe we name that whatever kind of it may be. But just like you were talking about, Heidi, like formalizing, like what are the limits? what happens when we don't meet the expectation, what happens when we do, and to think about that as shaping your child's behavior. And so, and again, it's a teaching kind of moment. So they're not going to get it right every time, but that's why you already have these things in place. So you don't have to kind of think about, oh, they didn't do the laundry. Now what am I going to do with them? Kind of, it takes the emotion in the moment out of all of that, which really can sever the relationship, which is certainly not what we want to encourage here.
It's true. And it's no fun to fight over things, but I will say, having that consistency and that certain expectation, I've seen it with my older daughter. It used to be the argument of like, can I go to my friends? Look at your room. Do you think, it looks fine? All of the back and forth. No, that's not clean to my standards. And now she comes to ask me and she's like, my room's already done. Like, she just knows. We've set that expectation. We've set that guy, and she knows that does not mean just pick everything up and throw it on your bed or shove it under the bed. And it's so helpful. It's so helpful. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the moment, we forget that just having that consistency is really key. And like you said, it does create that bond. So now there's no argument. Sure, you knew what you needed to do. Yes, you can go to your friend's house. And, and I see in her this maturity all of a sudden, like, oh, I know the steps that I need to take. If I want to go do something, I need to be responsible for myself. And, I'm really proud of that. And it came from several years of learning with no consistency.
Saving lives means staying informed. Knowing the dangers of using counterfeit prescription pills can help those you care about and keep our community safe. As a parent, educator, neighbor, or friend, we all play a role in building safe and healthy futures for ourselves and our loved ones. Do your part. Take the first step today. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com to access education, prevention, and treatment resources. Counterfeit prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly. Be their protector. Be informed. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com.
So I know we've talked, a lot about teenagers and older kids, but really this starts with young kids, this establishing of relationships and bonds. And, younger kids don't always have the tools or the skills to say, hey, I had a really hard day. Can we talk? Oftentimes it comes out as, hey, can we play? You want to build Legos with me? Hey, can we make cookies? Can we, that they're just looking for time, attention, and somebody to listen, which is why I have this shirt on. One of the most important things I think we can do as parents is to really listen to our kids, because sometimes when they ask for help, they don't say it exactly like that. But if you can start building those relationships, one of the things Heidi and Amy, I know you both have talked about, is establishing that quality time and bonding with young kids will help endure that relationship through adolescence. And it's part of those building blocks. And you start early and really getting to that place so that maybe when your teens are older, they finally do get to the place where they can say, you know what, I had a tough day. Can we talk?
Yeah, I love everything you're saying. I love the t-shirt, by the way. I got to find me one of those. But like this whole idea of listening is so important, and it does take time to like stop and really make this intention. A rule of thumb I like to share is to spend 10 to 15 minutes a day just really getting into your child's world, and enter it with a sense of curiosity. Like, how are they experiencing the world? What are they looking, what are they looking at? What are they hearing? Because it's also very entertaining, right? When you can see things through a child's eyes. But getting in a habit of doing that just for 10 or 15 minutes a day can be super powerful. But something else that's really important, as kids grow, they often need us more. But as parents, like, for example, when they transition into junior high and high school, our time with them decreases like by half, right? But they need us just as much. So if we're building those relationships when they're young, that's going to pay dividends in the future. But I would keep that rule of thumb to be the same, 10 to 15 minutes a day, really focusing on what your child's world looks like, can go a long way.
Well, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Heidi, Amy, Greg, this has been a wonderful conversation about how to start those building blocks of conversation, relationship, and bonding with your kids, consequences, all that, and how that really carries through. And it's going to be a main theme of a lot of our episodes. Sort of the through line is always to listen and to be present. So thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate everything you shared with us.
Thanks so much, Jodie.
Thank you.
And make sure and join us for our next episode.
Coming up on the next episode of Awkward Conversations.
The first 6 weeks on campus are typically the most at-risk time for college students.
Sometimes that can lead students to try to wander to look for parties or look for social environments.
I know when I went in as a freshman, it was like the greatest moment in the world when an upperclassman talked to you.
Onset of substance use can also put them at risk for kind of being derailed from their path if college is the path that they're looking for.
Make sure to check out getsmartaboutdrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the Elks DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.